So usually cybersecurity is focused on like that, protecting like cyberspace, or like what we like to, call like everything that's on the internet, from the perspective of an organization. Whereas information security is more internal focused and more about focusing the internal belongings of an organization and keeping that protected. But again,
Hey friends, welcome to the Tech Unlock podcast. I'm so glad you're here. This show aims to demystify tech careers and diversify the tech industry by giving you the keys to unlock your successful tech careers. I'm your host, Grace McJones. Let's jump right in. Hello everyone, welcome to episode 28 of the Tech Unlock podcast. I am thrilled to have my guest today, Christina Morillo. It's been a while. We've been talking like, hey, we'd love to get you on the podcast. And finally, the stars aligned, our calendars aligned, and we are here. Welcome to the show. How are you doing?
thank you. I'm super excited to be here. I'm doing great. Well, all things considered, right?
All things considered, yes, we're surviving and we made
Yeah.
it to December, which is honestly like worth
We should
celebrating
celebrate.
at this
Yes.
point. um, so, the goal of this episode is to really demystify the world of information security. I know a lot of people are curious about this field. It's one of the fastest growing field within the tech industry. And reading up on you, I know, you were born and raised in New York to Afro-Dominican parents, and you actually had someone who was in tech. I think it was your uncle who was an electrical engineer. Talk about how having that influence earlier on helped you to get to where you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. So, right. So my uncle was an electrical engineer. He's since retired. And basically he always had like math books, science books, and like bits and pieces of like circuit boards and just things in his like room. And so I was a curious child, and when I was not reading through like the encyclopedia, and I won't name which one because then it'll give my age, I was I was in his room, right? Like looking at his math books and his science books, asking questions, and also playing with his gadgets, and like just curious and wanting to understand more about it, about the things that he was putting together.
Mm-hmm.
Just fascinated by that. So I think that kind of exposed me to that there was something more out there, right? Rather than like the typical.
So when you went to college to study information technology, did you have any type of support? How was that, experience for you? Because I mean, one thing that I wish I had known was that this field is predominantly dominated by white men. It's all changing, but slowly but surely. And so, how were you able to just foster through your education experience to starting your first job and just navigating all those nuances to where you are today?
Yeah. So I'll start backwards, and I'll tell you that I'm still learning every
Mm,
day because things change, right? So
yes.
the constant thing in life is change. And so you have to be comfortable with that in this industry and just in tech in general. But I when I started my career there, it wasn't as popular, right? Tech wasn't as popular. It was more so computer science or just like information technology. So I started on this like information technology and engineering track, right? I had no idea what I wanted to be when I grew up. I didn't really see computer scientists per se, or I
Mm,
didn't understand that I didn't know at the time that there was a computer field, right? I knew that I loved computers, but I didn't know that I could work doing this stuff until way later on. So initially I registered for international business because I said, well, I speak multiple languages, right? And like, why not? And
right.
then shortly after I realized that I hated that, like 100%. And I
Oh,
was
wow.
like, I don't want to do this. I want to do computer stuff. And at the time, my college was offering like a network administration, like associate. So I started there to see if I liked it. I loved it. I finished that. And then I went on to pursue a bachelor's in information technology. During that time, I had the support of like the instructors. Believe it or not, at the time there was this instructor, a professor of mine, who was a networking specialist, and she was a Jewish woman
Mm,
who loved Novell, and I just like, I don't know, I gravitated to the excitement, like to her excitement. she wasn't a problematic woman. She was more of a you know, like a nurturer, right? So she was really passionate about getting other folks excited about kind of the space. And when I saw that she existed, I knew that okay, women do exist.
Mm.
Uh, and I just I was very focused on that. So everything else was noise. Unfortunately, I will say that it's not as possible today because the noise dominates, right? And so it's not as easy to just filter. And then you have the gaslighting and all that. Back then, I I was able to run circles around my, classmates and then colleagues because I was very, I was very ambitious and very focused on I know this stuff better than you, right? So I was kind of tunnel vision, so all the noise didn't really stick. I was like, whatever, I can build this computer in like 20 minutes. Give me a second. Like, don't play with me.
Wow.
So I had that New York attitude.
Yeah.
Um, but as I've progressed in my career, as I've worked at large organizations, I will tell you that it's gotten way more challenging
Mm.
to the point that I have mixed feelings today about even recommending that other women of color uh, and Black women even enter the tech field, or at least if more of us do, which is always a good thing, that we do so with caution, right? So
Yeah.
I like demystifying, right? Like what it really means to be in technology, and what are some of the challenges that you will have to face and overcome, and continue to do so as you aim to go higher, right? Because it only gets harder.
Yeah, and you brought up a lot of things that I would like to talk about. First of all, can you define what the noise is that you mentioned? And
Yeah.
then moving into, the struggle, right? I think especially as, Black and brown women of obviously advocating for more women in technology, but it's kind of misleading or misguiding because there is a lot that goes into just doing your job because you are met with either microaggressions or all these things where no one really tells you about until you get in. You're like, whoa, what's happening? Um, and so I would never want to discourage anyone from obviously pursuing their passion in technology. But I wish, like what you were saying, that people are told me, like, hey, here's something to respect as a minority in technology. Like you're going to deal with different things that sometimes have nothing to do with your job, but takes up your time and your mental energy to navigate. And so circling back, what is that noise you talked about? And kind of give us an example, if you can, of how you've able to overcome some of just challenges that I talk about, even if you're still going through them, because I feel like you said things always change.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you just mentioned, right? That's a lot of the noise, like the microaggressions, the gaslighting, the things that, I basically it's like setups, right? It's like you're walking down a path and then you're perfectly fine. You're walking with your friends and your colleagues and you're happy. And then you get a big brick in the middle of your path. And then you climb over the brick, keep going, and then you get rocks that get thrown at you for no reason. Like you're just like, okay, I'm like, why is this
What's
mine?
going
Like,
on?
what's
Yeah.
going on? Like, why don't you don't have a ball in front of you? You're not tripping over yourself. You're just smooth sailing, right? And then you start to realize that it's it's part of the whole systems of oppression and all that, right? And I don't claim to be a scholar in that subject, so I won't talk about it in depth, but just based on my experiences, it just becomes way more challenging to do your job, right? You are pegged into this box. There are expectations. You enter this world. You start a role and you are already being boxed in, right? There's this assumption that you want to do diversity work because you're
Mm.
brown, right? There's this assumption that you need to help women. That's your whole focus because you're brown. And the biggest one of all is that there's this assumption that you are not technical because you are a woman and you are a Black or brown woman at that, right? So you have to fight this constant challenge of being accepted, doing your job, having impact, doing your job extraordinarily well, right? Because other folks don't have to do it extraordinarily well, but you do.
That's true.
And meanwhile you're focusing on wanting to get better, improve professional development, wanting to move into leadership if that's something that you aspire to do. And so you're dealing with all this other extra junk that has nothing to do with you like learning and growing and excelling in your professional career, but it has everything to do with the fact that you're a minority, you're brown, and these systems were not made for you, right?
Mm,
And so, um, there comes a time where you reach this crossroads and you're like, after, much of many heartbreaks,
mm,
uh, and I will tell you that I reached that crossroads many times, many times. This year I reached that crossroad, and actually that was one of the reasons why I left Microsoft, my dream company, to be honest. Uh, but everything is a learning opportunity, right? I see,
yeah.
like, not to sound cliche, but I think these type of challenges really kind of reset you and make you go back to your why, right? Like, I think that's like you have to go back to that self-discovery process and think, why am I here? Why do I want to continue to stay here? What can I learn? How do I reshift? How do I pivot? And how do I reinvent myself, right? Because your only other option is to give up, get
Mm,
discouraged, and hide under a rock. And is that really an option for us?
not really.
Exactly. So,
And so I love that you said you have to go back to what's your why. I'm curious, you've been in this industry for a while. So what's that why that's been keeping you here?
yeah, for me, it's funny that you ask that question because I feel like that's changed for me,
Mm,
right? And I was actually, to be honest, last night I was brainstorming. I was mind mapping. So we'll get to my favorite tool, but I was mind
okay.
mapping on my favorite tool and writing down what I like, what I don't like into like this mind map, just scratching it out, just to get like everything out of my head onto something, right? And what I realize is that my why has always been that I'm just curious. I love to learn. I'm a lifelong learner, and that I love to solve problems by leveraging technology, right? But even more so, I love the connecting with people,
Yeah.
right? On like a foundational level. And so I feel like the people solving problems and then the technology is like the cherry on top, right? Because we're all techies. We love to like break things, fix things. We feel accomplished when we do that. And then, you wrap it around this like solving a problem, helping someone, I don't know, build their first computer, helping someone deploy Office, helping someone move to the cloud. Like, these are all things that I love. And so I think that for me, when I think back to why am I still here, why don't I just like go become a teacher or like do something else where I'm actually, where there's more of a like direct impact to
Mm,
like a person. I think about, well, like, this is what I love, this is all I've known, this has been my career for over 25 years. And so for me, I have to think of other ways to pivot while still kind of remaining true to the things that I enjoy, right?
yeah.
So, yeah. But
It's
I think that it changes, right? It
yeah.
changes as you have a family, when you're younger, you're ambitious, you're like, head on, I'm going to get that C level, role.
Role.
That was me. I'm going to become a CTO. I'm going to become a CISO. I'm going to become a, CSO. And then I realized that, like, oh, okay, I have to have like a white man sponsor me. Oh, okay, I need to be on site more. Oh, okay, I need to be part of this like in crowd,
Mm,
um, in order to like get put up for those positions. Oh, okay, I have to look a certain way. I have to talk a certain way. I have to be non-threatening, and I cannot speak up for what I believe in, and I cannot speak truth to power, as we've seen recently. So all those things is like a battle. Um, and now I'm like, I'm just going to be an individual contributor,
yeah.
and I'm just going to live my life with my family and be happy for my mental health because,
Yes.
yeah, yeah.
I
So,
love I mean I love that because you said just a whole bunch of things I'm trying to unpack, but those things that are not really mentioned in terms like you saying, oh, you have to have a sponsor, or you have to do all those things. It's like all those hoops you have to like jump when you not only get into tech, but I think the biggest thing is advancing in your career, right? I think that for me, like I haven't really witnessed a lot of uh senior women leaders, especially those who are Black and brown, and obviously with recent like events, like whenever they do excel to that level and they speak truth to power, they get fired. People don't believe their story, and you just like, okay, wow, like you said, am I going to protect my mental health, or what is it? And I'm glad that you've chosen to continue in your line of work, while also prioritizing self-care, because that's important as well, and we don't talk about that enough.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think sometimes, I mean, it's all about, for me, it's been about really understanding like psychological safety,
Mm,
and what that means, like for me, like how important is that for me, and what I'm willing to give up in order to have that and maintain that, right?
yeah.
And so, unfortunately, um, as disappointing as it is to like the younger Christina, is that I just had to decide to take another path and say, well, for my mental health and for my sanity, um, I no longer want to pursue that, right?
Mm,
Because there's it's too much for me, and it doesn't really feed my soul, doesn't give me that energy, doesn't give me the ability to like really help others.
yeah.
It's more about helping myself at that point, not discouraging anyone that does want to go into leadership position. I think that it's, I again, it's your path, follow it,
Mm,
like it's your journey, right? No one can like determine that for you. But for me, based on my experiences, and I'm sure you have similar ones, as I saw you nodding your head, um it's too much of a cross to bear, right? So it's just like, yeah, no, I'm not gonna go through
yeah.
that.
And one
It's
thing
a
you
lot.
said, yeah, you're allowed to, change your mind, yeah, right, right, like
Right.
pivot. I think 2020, the word is pivot. Like if something's not
Yes.
working, try something else, try another avenue or a way to have the impact that you want, to help the people that you want to help. And so diving into, what you do on a day to day, for those who are listening and probably maybe haven't heard the term information security, how would you explain it to them?
you know I would say it's a controversial subject, and
All
you will
right.
find many definitions, but it at the foundational level, information security is like really folks who are in specific positions to protect the information, the intellectual, like um, the intellectual gems, let's say, of an organization, right? So there are a lot of things, processes, paperwork, applications, data, customer data, that companies don't want leaked outside, right? Externally, right? They're
Right.
private, they should be held confidential and in a safe manner and protected. And so information security professionals work in different aspects. There are many roles, from legal all the way to responding to incidents on a day-to-day, minute-by-minute basis, that seek to protect that, right? The confidentiality, the integrity, and the availability of a company's or organization's data. You also you may have also heard of the term cybersecurity, and
Yes. What is the
yeah,
difference? Because I feel like I mix that up all the time.
a lot of folks use that interchangeably, and it kind of it's all like semantics, but usually when folks talk about cybersecurity, it's about protecting like intrusions from external intrusions, right? So when we talk about cyber criminals, or usually they call them hackers. Hackers are not all bad, by the way. That's why I like to say hackers is one subset. Cyber criminals are the bad guys doing the bad things. They're the ones that like infiltrate your network. They're the ones that try to like basically break in, like bank robbers break into the bank. Those are like the bad hackers. So usually cybersecurity is focused on like that, protecting like cyberspace, or like what we like to call like everything that's on the internet, from the perspective of an organization. Whereas information security is more internal focused and more about focusing the internal belongings of an organization and keeping that protected. But again, it's all semantics, and a lot of folks choose to use the terms interchangeably mostly, but I like to use information security because it's a little bit more true to the day-to-day work, right?
Yeah. And for those who are thinking of, getting into this field and may not have, gone to university to study this, what are some certifications they can work on that would help them get a better chance of working in this field?
Yeah. So that's a really great question. And that's a question that comes up a lot. And whenever any of us in the space get that question, you'll always get a different answer, right? So depending on who you ask. But the most important thing before you even dive into the certification area is to figure out what area do you like most interests you, right? What do you want to do, right? Do you love, reverse engineering malware? Do you love, talking about privacy and implementing policies, internally, uh, at the corporate level. Like, you have to really be specific. So you have to do your due diligence and learn more about the roles, the different
Mm.
areas, follow folks on LinkedIn that are in that have like the term information security or cybersecurity, just to learn more about what they do, right? For example, once you determine that, then there's usually a specific path for folks, depending on the role, right? So, for example, I didn't have to get a certification to get into the space because I was already kind of working in the space, doing more identity work, identity like access management work, and networking work for years. So I kind of like just navigated directly. It was just like a seamless transition. So it's a little bit different now, but uh, depending on your area of expertise. So if I wanted to get into more pen testing, right, one of the things that I would do is that I would learn Linux, right? And I would, maybe go for some vendor certifications. If I was really focused on cloud security, I would look at, cloud certifications. Another entry level certification that folks like to recommend a lot is a Security Plus certification from CompTIA. So that gives you like a foundational, like a baseline, right? Like an entry level foundation. You get to understand what are some of the terms. That's also another good one for if you still have no idea which specific area, like niche area you want to get into. That'll give you a good overview. But I always start with, what is your why? Like, why, first of all, why do you want to get into the space, and what
Mm.
is it that you want to do? Like, what is the job that you're most interested in based on your research and your due diligence? And that's something that you have to get used to, because there are so many different niche areas, um, that it's like, and there really isn't direct path, right?
Right,
It's
right.
not like getting a degree is the path. It's not like getting one certification is the path. It's really about the hands-on experience, right? And so, you may not have any certifications, but you may have done your own due diligence, your own studying, your own building out your lab, testing, right, securing, and that may get you a job, right? So again, there's no like direct path. So there's not a one-to-one match against certifications.
Yeah, that's
And
awesome.
it's not a requirement also, but
Yeah.
it, mhm.
I love that you mentioned like there's no one path, right? Because I do feel like tech is so broad that people are like, oh, I want to get into tech, and you're like, where? Like, like how do we, you have to really simplify to, okay, what part of tech, right? Because you have the non-technical part, and then you have the tech, and then you have, from languages if you're trying to be a software engineer, and then you have this part. And so it is so big, and I try to help people, yeah, narrow it down. And something that helps, like you mentioned, is stating your why. Like, why do you want to learn this? And if it's for the money, that's great, but it's like, would you last long, after you've made enough money, which is totally fine. Some people are in it because they have families, to provide
Yeah, they
for and
want to
all
take care
that
of their
stuff.
family.
And that's totally fine. And then there are people who want to have an impact or have solutions or things they want to do. And so definitely looking to narrowing your why definitely helps in terms of navigating how to get into the tech industry. And so right now you're a senior security program manager, and talk to us about the day in and day outs of what that entails for you, because I know you've had different roles all throughout your
Yeah.
career. But what is something you love about it? What is something that's the most challenging? Want to learn more about your role.
Yeah. So at Microsoft, actually, I just left Microsoft in November. So initially I was a senior program manager at Microsoft, and then I moved to more of a like program slash product manager role.
Okay.
And then I decided to, seek out another opportunity outside of Microsoft where I could really hone like my product management skills, but
Mm.
stay within like the security space. And really what I was looking for is, I was looking for that like cross between, or that the intersection of like security slash technology,
Mm-hmm.
business, and like impact, right? So how
Mm,
do I understand what's going on in the security engineering, like in the security engineering team, right, which I'm a part of, understand what are the objectives at the business level, and how can I find alignment, right, to like, do the best thing for both the team, for the company, etc. So it's more about kind of leveraging my technical skill set and using that to kind of elevate,
right.
for lack of a better term, versus being tactical. So looking at less tactical stuff, like less, I'm going to sit at the keyboard every day and do this, and more like, how do I level it up, right? How do I help to build out a robust security program, or robust security engineering kind of teams, and et cetera. So still leveling up, but so what I was going to say is I just started this role in November. So I'm still
Congrats.
learning. Thank you. I'm still learning a lot about the organization, about the team, and looking at where I can kind of glue the pieces together, right? Based on my skill set. So most of the time, though, so for my role now, I'm more internal facing, and then you have product manager roles that are more external facing. And in those external facing roles, which is a good question if you're like interviewing for product management role, you ask like, is this an external facing role? Am I going to be building and shipping products, or part of a team that's building and shipping products, or internal facing, right? So that's a good way to like kind of separate some of your day-to-day duties. A lot of my day-to-day duties right now, as I'm kind of ramping, are scheduling meetings with a lot of like all throughout the organization, even outside of security engineering, IT, development teams, just other teams, to understand like our existing processes and
Hmm.
how security kind of integrates, right? And then, discovering and really assessing like gaps, right? And then coming up with a plan, and a roadmap for next year, as far as like, okay, how do we kind of integrate security seamlessly, that will then impact the company and then our external facing customers.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And you mentioned about like interviewing like X questions and whatnot, and something I know like you have your own podcast called Callers of InfoSec, and I listen
Mhm.
to it, and something that you and your co-host talked about, like how there isn't really a lot of entry level information security roles, and so
Right.
how the people if they're listening right now, and eventually get an interview, what are some tips in terms of nailing that interview? And obviously you've been in the industry for a long time, so things might have changed, but just from your experience, what are some things to keep in mind going through that interview phase? Because it's different if you're coming in as maybe a software engineer or as a designer and whatnot, but for this space, what are some tips that people can take away with them?
Yeah, I mean, I think we shouldn't discount the your previous experience, right? Like that can benefit you. That's
Okay.
another important aspect as you like kind of figure out your why and where you want to go into, how to align your skill set and your experience to like whatever new opportunity. And I think that that's also relevant for interviewing, right? Like you you want to be super crisp and clear. Like you don't want to lie about the level of experience. But what a lot of hiring managers have told me before is that they're looking for someone that has that kind of, I don't want to use the word grit, but I just want to say like the motivation to like really
Mm,
dive in and learn something from scratch, right? Like even if they don't know it, but also look at it from a problem solution. Like what are you bringing to the table, right? Um, how do you you know how do you see these problems, how do you translate them into opportunities, and how do you look at what is the like return on investment, right? And you don't have to necessarily have like 80 years of experience to do that. I think what I would say is that there is a gap, because hiring managers, and sometimes HR, there's like a disconnect, right, where they're requesting, if you look at these job specs, they're basically requiring like a unicorn, right? So they're looking at
right.
someone that has like that. It's like someone that has, I always like to use the analogy of someone that has 10 years experience and a 2-year technology, right? Which is like
Wow.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
So what I usually say is relationships are key. And I don't mean inauthentic relationships. I mean, really cultivating organic relationships, right? Like really being curious about what other people are working on, right?
Yeah.
What do they do? What do you do? Oh, this is an interesting blog post. And I don't mean like stalk people, not at all. But I mean being like genuinely curious and engaging with folks like that are within the realm that you want to be in will give you that insight, right? You'll understand how things work. You'll understand what are the things they care about. And when you kind of network across and build these like, or cultivate these relationships, it really, really helps. Because what happens is that then people start getting to know you at a foundational level. And they're like, this is someone, I want to work with Grace. Grace is someone that I want to work with because she's a go-getter. And although she may not have, experience in the security space, she can get it. We'll train her. We'll, send her to classes because she has like that kind of like that open mind and she's ready to
Growth
dive in.
mindset.
And yeah, oh God, that term.
I
She's
know
ready
it's gonna
to.
trigger you. I was like, it's gonna
No,
trigger you, but
I know. I was like,
but
triggered. No, I mean, no, but it is true. It's cliche, but
yeah,
it is true, right? Like being, not closing down to these type of challenges. But yeah, I think relationships are the name of the game, right?
mm,
Because even though I've been in the industry for a long time, I still have to like go through the process, right? Like I still went through, interviewing this year, and I still had to really understand like what are folks looking for, what are the key words. One thing that I recommend to people, and I don't know if people like do this, but I still do this. I do so much homework before I interview. Like I literally have like a
yes.
spreadsheet and I take the job role. I look at, the different keywords. I look at how it aligns to my experience. I look at, I try to research like day-to-day responsibilities, right? I look at blog posts. I research the people that I'm interviewing with. Not only that, I comb the company's website. I look at their values. I look at their mantras, even if whether or not I disagree or agree with them.
Mm-hmm.
Because what I want to do is that I want to take some of those keywords and really use them during the interview, right? I want to show the company that this is what I'm about, right? While also bringing like what I've done, right? I think a lot of people take for granted what a lot of people take for granted is that people want results. So if you talk about projects that you've worked on, you know, challenges, right? How did you overcome these challenges, especially when you have to work across teams and people and difficult people, right? How do you
Mm-hmm.
move forward? How do you get the job done? People really want to see how you think. So I think doing that due diligence and like combing through and really doing your homework will land you in a better place. So that and the relationships. I got this opportunity like because of a relationship. So someone recommended me for the role. And although I had to go through the same process that everyone else did,
Mm-hmm.
like I would have not seen the role had that person not recommended me, right? So I
Yeah.
kind of got a leg up in that sense. But it's not necessarily like a hey plan to like, oh, I'm gonna go through this person, right? But I'm just saying that it always helps when you have that when you have a relationship and you go through like an internal network versus you coming from the outside.
Yeah, it's so hard these days to apply for something and just get an interview or get the job because you're dealing with thousands of applicant and you're trying to figure out, how to navigate that system. And so when you're able to, you know, use your network,
Yep.
yeah, when you're able to use your network and have their personal relationship, then you can learn more about the role. Like, okay, what is this, team looking for? Like, who was the last person on the team? Like, you can have insight to more of what to expect and learn about the culture. That's another thing because you want to make sure that you not only are a culture fit, because I know people have issues with that term, but make sure that that's somewhere that you'll be accepted for who you are. And relationships, I totally agree, go a long way in the job
Yeah.
search process.
Yeah. I don't know if you're like black or brown, you're gonna be accepted for who you are. But I mean, I think
Yeah.
yeah, I think there's always an exception there. But I think that yeah, to your point, like culture fit, if there's a company that's like super focused on that, it's like you have
Hmm.
to really learn how to read between the lines. Like what are they
Yes.
really trying to say? So that's why I say it's very important to do your due diligence and your homework. It's not only about, combing the website and looking at like their values and what they're kind of marketing, but also doing your other research, right? And really trying to understand the company. And then always remember that, like, you're also interviewing them, right? So like
Mm-hmm.
come up with questions that you really want to know. Like I come up with my questions, right? Like I want to know what are some of the goals, or what are some of the projects, what are some of the difficulties, right? How do you manage your team? Like, and scenario based questions as well. Same questions they throw at me, I throw scenario
Right,
based
right.
questions at them too, right? Because I'm trying to get a deeper level of understanding of, hey, is this person a micromanager? Is this culture pretty toxic, right? Do they really focus um, on saying things like, things are ambiguous, right? Which
Yeah.
means there's chaos versus clarity. So I think that comes with time. For everyone, you learn as you go, but it's important to ask those questions right beforehand.
Yeah.
Um, mhm.
Definitely. That's what I tell people all the time and students. I'm like, make sure when at the end of that interview, when they're like, do you have questions for us? I'm like, that's your time to shine and like figure out if this is the role in the team that you want to be on. So
Exactly.
thanks for sharing
Exactly.
that.
Of course. I wish someone would have told me that
Mm,
a long time
yeah.
ago. I had to
Yeah.
learn the hard way, but hey, I
That's
can
why
now
we're here
tell you.
sharing, telling people
Exactly.
say they're not in the same spot that we were. So now kind of switching to our lightning round, which is the fun questions to get to know you better. Feel free to answer them in 6 words or less. Number one question: what is the biggest misconception about your role?
That I am not technical.
Hmm. Yeah. Question number two: what is your favorite piece of technology right now?
My iPad Pro.
Really
I'm loving it. Yes, I have my pen right here.
awesome.
I just got it and I love it. Yeah.
Question number three. How would your parents describe what you do for a living?
They would say she works with computers. I keep it simple.
Nice. Number four, what is something that brings you joy right now?
Rest.
Love it. Number five, if you could use technology to solve one problem, what would it be?
Wow, that's a hard one. That's like
I,
one of those like really intense.
it doesn't have to be too deep, It could be, I don't know, going to bed on time. I don't know. It could be anything that you can think of right now.
Okay, so I would figure out a way that we could work less and make
Mhm.
more money and have more peace.
Hey, I'm all about that. Let me know when you figure that out. I'll definitely
Yes.
support.
Yes.
And lastly, what is the best career advice you've ever received?
Woo. If
You've
I had to
gotten so
think of
many.
one, I haven't gotten so many, but I think that the ones that I've gotten have been super important
Mm,
to me. I will give you one that I'm kind of like clinging to now, which is or as of late, it's really about like not comparing yourself to anyone else's middle, right? Like not comparing your beginnings to anyone else's middle, because the person that you believe was an overnight success has been like 15 years in the making, right? I
yes.
mean, I think that social media does a really terrible job of giving us that context all of the time. So we think, oh, that person's just like lucky and famous and they work at X company, but they've been at this for decades, right? Or at least for years. So
Yeah.
I think it's important to set that expectation.
Yeah. That's solid advice. And,
Yeah.
you're someone that always gives back to your community. I follow you on Twitter. You're always interacting and, sharing your knowledge. So, what are some things you're working on that you'd like to share with this community, and how can we continue to support you?
Yeah, so I'm really excited that I am actually releasing a book with O'Reilly next year. It's going to be part of the 97 Things series. So it's going to be focused on information security. And so 97 things information security pros should know. So really, really excited about that. It's like in progress. I have been getting contributions. I have been editing and reading and back and forth and kind of like program managing that. And so I'm super, super excited about that. So yeah, if anyone is currently in the security space and wants to contribute their insight or tidbit, I'm still, accepting contributions till like mid-January. So you can follow me on Twitter or reach out, Twitter, LinkedIn, and I can send you more info.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. That's huge. Congrats. I can't wait to
Yeah, I'm
learn more
excited
and see the
for
book release. But yeah, thank you so much for joining me on the Tech Unlock podcast. I learned so
it.
much from
Yeah.
your journey, and thank you for always being authentic, transparent, because we need more leaders like you in the tech space. And if you're listening to this podcast and you have a question for me or Christina, you can reach us on Twitter. I think we're both active on that platform. So yeah,
Yes.
let us know if you have any questions. And yeah, thank you, Christina. Happy
Yeah.
holidays and enjoy the
Thank
rest
you
of your
for
day.
having me. Happy holidays
Yes.
as well. And stay
All right.
safe.